Good evening again, class. Again, it's Joan Myers, and I'm speaking to you today on my topic I have been addressing since the first attending exercise for this class. My passage, as a reminder, came from Luke chapter 4, verses 14 through 30, and this passage addressed the beginning of Jesus's public ministry. We saw where Jesus came from the desert experience into Galilee and how our story unfolds. We were asked to specifically identify the trouble or the plot in the passage that we were given. So we were given 5 questions, and I'm going to try my best to address each of these questions and for you to see the trouble that I'm trying to bring out in this passage. The first question says, begin with the ordinary settled world at the beginning of the story. Here I have prepared a chart, and here is my initial world. My initial world, or their initial position, was 1, they were a religious set of people who of course practiced religion as well as they had religious beliefs. Here also they were in a normal world where they were looking for a true Messiah. So this is the initial setting of the story. The second question was, where do we see trouble or a hint of trouble unfolding in the story? As soon as they realized that their expectation was not aligned with God's plan, trouble started to be reflected. There was a hint of trouble when they realized that. Their expectation, Jesus came to bring good news, but somehow they saw the good news that Jesus brought as bad news. Bad news because they refused to submit to his lordship. That's basically what happened. They refused to submit to Jesus' authority. And I am sure that we can all relate to that we want Jesus to do for us, but somehow we are not ready, or we are willing to submit ourselves to his lordship and to his authority. So their expectation was that they realized and they questioned the fact that this boy who they saw grew up says he's now the Messiah. They questioned that a lot. So we saw, as far as they're concerned, their expectations were kind of really existing, and we can see clearly why. Also, if they will accept the changed life in Jesus, if they will accept this changed life in Jesus, it had to happen through Jesus. They were not willing to do that. Will not submit to his authority, will not submit to his lordship. So that was their expectation. The fourth question asks, how does the story move towards resolution? Well, for me, I am not seeing it moving towards resolution. Their resolution was continuously living in their dark world. But I saw the story moving through rejection instead of resolution. Rejection, where they wanted to kill Jesus, and that Jesus moved into Capernaum because, he was there talking to them about this day of salvation, talking to them about the scriptures being fulfilled in their ear. But they were not interested in that. They were interested in doing what they wanted to do. So when they saw that Jesus was not about their business, but they needed to be about Jesus's business, they got angry. So here we see they were offended when Jesus brought up the stories about Elijah and Elisha, as well as when Jesus spoke about the blessing of pagans as well as the religious people. They did not like that because they did not consider themselves pagans. They considered themselves religious people. So what is the new resituated world we can imagine at the end of the story? At the end of my story, there was no new world. There was no great, good, better world that existed, but I saw a dark world. A dark world where they rejected Jesus and they lived in the bondage of sin. So here is where they ended up, in a dark world. For the purpose of Nazareth and Galilee, they live in a world of rejection for what God has already done in their midst. So here they are. They preferred to live in darkness where there was light. They decided that they would live hungry in the midst of God's provisions for them. They continued living in blindness in the midst of light. They wanted to continue living in prison when there was freedom. They wanted to continue being deaf, living in a world where they would not hear anything at all in the midst of God speaking to them. So here we saw a really, really rebellious set of people. Their bright new world was once at the point where it could have changed, but they did not want that. But they preferred to remain in darkness and live this terrible life. So here, in closing, I want to say that when Jesus comes and he speaks to us, we have the ability to change our lives. But many of us refuse to do that. We continue to live in disobedience to God, and that is not his plan for us. He wants us to accept Jesus as being the Lord of our lives and the Christ of our lives, to submit to his authority, to submit to his lordship. Here are these set of people. They did not want to submit to Christ, but they rejected Christ because they wanted to admit they did not want to admit to their sinful and desperate condition. Finally, let us see, first, if we are familiar with Jesus, we must be especially careful to apply his teaching to our own heart. The people of Nazareth were not receptive to Jesus' teaching, in part because they were overly familiar with him. Isn't this not Joseph's son, they ask? Familiarity breeds contempt, and I addressed that last week. They had known Jesus when he worked in his father's carpentry shop, so now he's coming to say that he's the Messiah. Secondly, if we reject Jesus today, we might not get another chance or an opportunity to receive him. The people of Nazareth rejected Jesus, so he passed through their midst and went on his way. And I'm sure he went on his way to some other people who were open to receive him. And how applicable is that in our lives, that there are times when Jesus speaks to us, but we do not respond to him. So he doesn't wait on us, because there are other people who really want him. So he moves on. He may not return again, and so we would have missed an opportunity. I want to encourage us tonight. I want to encourage us in this cohort that as we prepare ourselves for ministry, that as God speaks to us in the midst of ridicule, in the midst of the crowd, in the midst of rejection, because there are people that we are going to reach out to introduce this Jesus to them, and they are probably going to not accept him. We cannot give up. Our job is to continue to take this message of Jesus, not just to our neighbors, but to the world. And the Lord is relying on all of us to do this. I hope you have benefited from this presentation tonight. And it is always my pleasure to share what I learn. And I am still open to learning so much more in this class. I thank you so much for your time.